This is Robert Bartolacci, the Mindshare Learning Report, Canada's learning and technology e-magazine. And welcome to This Week in Canadian EdTech, Mindshare TV Learning Moment with the legend Marc Prensky, best known for the phrase digital natives and digital immigrants, me being one of those. He is an author, keynoter on today's conversation, Unleashing the Power of 2 Billion Kids. Thank you for joining me today, Marc.
It's a pleasure to be here. You are one of the most forward-thinking people in this area. Thank you.
At least in Canada, perhaps for the moment, but you're very kind. A little bit about Marc. He's an award-winning, globally acclaimed practical visionary whose focus is on the world's 2 billion kids. He has spoken in over 40 countries, authored 8 books and over 100 articles and essays, and is, as I mentioned, coiner of the term digital native. And previously, he worked at the Boston Consulting Group for 6 years and ran a game-based learning company for over a decade. Currently is the founder and executive director of the Global Future Education Foundation in Palo Alto. I'm envious, Marc. You certainly embraced the growth mindset over the years. So impressive. How do you keep at it? Where do you get this energy from?
That's a great question. I am, as we discussed earlier, I'm 76 years old,
Wow.
or 76
I
years
didn't
young.
want to share your age, but now that you have,
I'm
and
happy
you
to
don't look
share it
it.
because it inspires people that you can still have energy and thoughts and thinking at every age, and that's important to understand because too many people give up at some point in their lives, and I don't give up. And so I keep thinking. I keep there's a famous quote from I forget who it is. Ancora imparo. I'm still learning. When there was his
Yes.
last words, I still say I'm still thinking, and
You,
uh, and I think beyond learning. Learning is not what counts anymore. It's
yeah.
really thinking, new thinking, accomplishing, um, and that's what I try to do.
Well, I love the notion of unleashing the power of 2 billion kids. I love the mindset that you have around inclusivity and diversity. And what inspired that?
Well, what we all want to do is to prepare all the kids in the world, the 2 billion kids that live in the world, for their mid to late 21st century future and lives. And we're struggling now with how to do that. So I went back to thinking about how we have done it in the past, and our solution through the 20th century was education. We put the people into rooms and they learned in advance. And now we've expanded that to some learning online, but basically learning in advance for years and years and years until you were ready, maybe to start doing something at the bottom. That is really no longer necessary. So humanity, in a sense, has outpaced education because we don't need to sit in rooms and prepare people for years and years and years before we put them out in the world. They come equipped with the entire world's knowledge in their pocket now. They are radically connected. They can do all sorts of things that young people just could never do before. And we're just at the very beginning of understanding that, of putting it into our consciousness, and of even more important, using it in a positive, productive way.
Thank you for that. Fascinating times. I love your thinking. And, the pandemic was transformational in many ways. 100% of educators had to use some form of tech-infused pedagogy. Dr. Steve Jordan's from the University of Toronto, psychologist, talked about the threat of the great snapback. In emergency learning, it wasn't elegant, and there was a lot of criticism around EdTech because of that. But there were some positives in the equation. Professional learning. We're creating an EdTech program for faculties of education that doesn't exist to help educators understand the sector and as a career option as well. So we're being mindful and we're being proactive. There's a lot of work to be done yet to get the teachers to embrace your thinking. How do we accomplish that?
The pandemic certainly made a difference in terms of means, but it made almost no difference at all in terms of the fundamental idea of what education is and how it works. To all the world almost, education is learning in advance. That's what it is. It is having a curriculum of stuff that you're supposed to learn, and you spend time learning in advance. And so the fact that we had to move to doing it not in classrooms but online didn't really change that at all. And I think that humanity has basically outpaced that. It's outgrown that whole idea. And in order to prepare young people for the 21st century, what's left of it, we better do something different than any form of education in class, online, whatever it is. And that thing is accomplishment. Young people now can do, and many of them know they've realized they can do things that young people could never, ever do before. They are becoming empowered. They have radical new connections, they have radical new capabilities. And what we call education doesn't acknowledge any of that at all.
Thank you for that. And hence the name of your new book, Empowered. What inspired the new book?
I just looked around and I said, well, okay, we have this education system, which I know well, which we all know well.
You
But
have
then
a son in the system,
I
or
have an 17-year-old who's about to become a high school senior, whom I tell every day, well, you better learn to play
congratulations.
the Thanks. Um, but when I looked around at the young people, at the kids, there was no fit at all between what we think of as education and who those young people were and what they needed in order to thrive in the future. And the more I saw that mismatch, and the more I spoke to young people and heard how unhappy they were in any kind of education, whether it was online or whether it was in classrooms or whether it was in Khan Academy, which I call the Museum of 20th Century Education, uh, doing 20th century education was just not what they either wanted to do or what was most likely to help them in their future lives.
Now, I want to give credit to some of the educators out there who have embraced, you know, the personalized learning approach, having kids be creators, storytellers. There are some really talented teachers out there, and
Oh, I agree. I,
right. But how do we scale
I
that?
agree with you on
Part of the
teaching.
challenge, part of the challenge is scalability. There's a challenge with how do you train, and do all the teachers want to be trained to be personalized learning model educators? Not necessarily, but
I see it very differently.
okay,
The
talk to
I
me.
see it really differently. So that you can the first of all, teachers are great, and what's great about teachers, and I think this is true for every teacher, is they've chosen to work with young people, and that's an important choice. The young people need that. What's wrong with what's going on, and the reason they're suffering, and the teachers know they're all suffering, is because they've chosen a profession, a way to help kids that is dying, that is over. And that is called what we call education, standing up and teaching them. We don't need to do that anymore. So in order to prepare our kids for the future, what we used to do was control them. We used to control them as parents and tell them what they could do. We used to control them as teachers and say, this is the curriculum you have to learn. We used to control them as culture and say, this is, who you are and what you have to do to be this kind of nationality. That is over. And so what we want is coaches who can help people realize their own dreams. And the interesting thing about that, the wonderful thing about that, is that it opens up the door to every adult to become, in a sense, a teacher of young people, because every adult has something, some experience on which they could coach a team of young people. And so I don't think that when you say, oh, they're creating and they're making books and they're all this kind of stuff, that's enough. That's not even close to enough. That what they are not doing and what they need to be doing and what they could be doing and what they want to do is accomplish, is to solve real world problems. There are three things that we're never going to run out of as human beings, no matter how much technology or AI or we get. We're never going to run out of people with dreams. We're never going to run out of problems to fix. And we're never going to run out of people who need help. And we're also never going to run out of people who want to realize their dreams and want to fix problems and want to help other people. And to me, that's the future of humanity. A lot of the other stuff will be done by AI. Companies will be run by AI. Infrastructure will be run by AI. But infrastructure won't be realizing dreams or fixing problems or helping other people. Humans are going to do that. And so if we understand that, then we'll prepare the humans to do those three things. And that we're not doing at all in education.
It's and you're painting a pretty broad stroke brush there. I've seen some excellence in models of success that we had in our Schools of the Future challenge. Students transformed a combustion car to an electric car, were able to race it in a competition, like real world accomplishment, as you allude to, right?
No,
Is it
wrong. Wait. Let me stop
okay?
you,
Yeah, yeah.
because you and I talked about this,
Okay,
and there's I make a difference between accomplishment and achievement,
okay.
and it was an achievement to turn a
Combustion car to
gas-based
like,
car
yeah.
into an electric car. But really, nobody cares about go-karts, except maybe in the few places where they have them. Here's what would be an accomplishment: if the kids went out and said, "Okay, we're going to make sure that what we've created gets distributed to the people who need them, so that people who have to get around can do it in this better way, so that the people in our community can do it in this better way." Just the fact that they managed to create a new kind of car, that isn't an accomplishment for me. It's not enough. There's no measurable positive impact except on them, maybe on them, but not on the world. And that's
Well,
what they require.
yeah, and there's a couple of things at play here. I mean, scalability. Being in a system, these school divisions are huge systems. How do you move a system like the Toronto District School Board with almost 300,000 students into your model of learning in a reasonable amount of time? Like how do
Here's what
you
I've
know?
concluded.
Yeah.
First of all, the transition will take 20 years because it's really a thinking transition, not a doing transition. If the thinking were there, it could happen very quickly. What's going to happen is that it's not going to happen in the schools. It almost certainly will not. It will happen separately from the schools, after school, in things like Scouts and 4-H and other places, what I call empowerment hubs, where young people start doing real world improving projects. And they get coaches and they hire adults that can help them. If they're interested in astronomy, they hire an astronaut. And they hire real people to help them do real things that either realize their dreams or fix problems or help other people. And that doesn't happen in schools because schools don't want to do that. They're not thinking about that. They are thinking about learning and putting content into kids' heads. And that's what they see their mission as. So while I love the teachers and I love the people who want to help young people, to help them in the way that they were helped, that we were helped in the 20th century, is the wrong way to go. That's the real question now, is whether we can still prepare our kids for the future by controlling them, by putting things into them. That's the way we used to do it as parents, as teachers, as employers. Now we have to open up their minds, get them to have whatever is in them personally come out of that in a new way. And that is, you mentioned scale. Let me address that. That's very important, because what people, I live in Silicon Valley. What people mean by scale is they say, well, how can we take the same thing, whatever our curriculum is, and deliver it to 2 billion kids, right? And I say that is not even remotely what we need to do. What we need to do, if you want to call it scale, is figure out what every human being at a young age is capable of. And it's not going to school, it's not even formal learning. It's setting goals and then accomplishing them and realizing projects and then being proud and having the self confidence and the self esteem that you get from having done something in the real world.
Uh,
Well, once you realize that,
yeah.
it's easy. Scale is
Well,
just setting up opportunities.
there's a shift that needs to be happening here from the industrial model to the next iteration of what school is. There's a lot of questioning about what model is ideal. To your point, learning happens everywhere. The community is the school. Our co-working innovation center, where we have co-op students, interns, it's buzzing here. There's all kinds of things going on. And but what about a school like High Tech High? I mean, it's in your backyard. You have no idea how many delegations from Canada have come down to visit High Tech High.
High Tech High is great. High Tech High was a harbinger. It was one of the first empowerment hubs that existed. It's beautiful. I write about it in my book. I think it's a wonderful example. It hasn't been repeated pretty much very much outside of San Diego and a few other places. And the thing that I would say about High Tech High is that it doesn't go far enough. That what High Tech High, and I've looked very carefully. I've spent time there. I've looked very
Right.
carefully at the projects that they do, and they have beautiful things hanging from the ceiling. And but their projects, with very few exceptions, are not improving the real world. Their projects may be improving their minds, they may be improving other stuff, but the only project that I really thought was a fabulous project, actually, there were two.
Hmm.
One was where the government ran out of money to test the water in San Diego, and they had bought all this expensive equipment. And as one of the High Tech High projects, they said, oh, what if we did that? What if we students did that? And they faced a lot. They did it. They published it. They faced a lot of obstacles because the government wouldn't put it online because they weren't certified enough. They were too young. They were all stuff. But they did it. It was real world and it was helpful to a lot of people. The other project I liked a lot is when they published a guide to the San Diego marine life. And that, again, people could buy that, use that, benefit that. But a lot of what they do, like what was shown in that movie that Ted Dintersmith made, was it
Hmm.
was a silly little clock that sits on the wall that does nothing. And it was a complex machine, and it took them a long time to build, but it absolutely did nothing for the world. And so the real change in perspective, and when we reframe this, is that it's not that learning is bad. It's that learning is not the goal. The goal is accomplishing, and learning is a byproduct.
Is
And
it
it's
more about experiences? Is that, I mean, life is about, people travel, people learn by doing, like, being on in different countries. It's the journey. Are you saying it's more of the journey,
no,
not
I'm not even
the
saying that it's the
destination?
journey. I'm saying what's the purpose of the journey? I'm
Hmm.
saying that if you are a person like I hope my son will do when he gets out of high school, he won't go to college. He will go travel the world and stay with a lot of my friends and see a lot of people. But if all he does is travel and he doesn't come back and do anything with whatever he's gained, like the empathy or the language or whatever it is, if he doesn't do anything with that, then I think it was a waste. I think it was literally a waste. I don't think the things you do just for yourself are are worth. They're worth it for you, but they're not
Right.
worth the world paying for it.
So
And so
developing your skills, competencies. Is,
I don't think that. I think that if you can use those in a positive way, then that's fine. You're better off. In my world, you'd be much better off getting the job and learning those on the job because then you know they'd be useful. But to have your list of competencies on your resume and say, guess what, I have all these competencies, I should get a job. No, there's no reason why you should. You have to be matched with what you can do and what you love to do with what somebody needs, and that is the piece that's missing. That's that matching of needs and people is completely missing.
and I'm just reflecting back with our discussion, and empowering kids in the right direction. I mean, I think of your long weekend and the mass shooting that happened. What drives somebody to do that? If you don't have hope, if you don't have a vision of where you're going, and someone who cares about you, I mean,
Well, here's the way I would look at it. So there are crazy people, and we know that they're crazy people, and we know that in my country they have access to guns much more easily. So we see these horrible things happen. But what if that young person had started from the very early times of his life, knowing that he could accomplish positive things that he could point to and say, see that? It wasn't good before I was here, but now it's great. And he had experiences of doing that over and over and over again. My sense is he would have been happier doing positive things for the world than doing what he did, which were clearly negative things for the world. He thought that was the only thing he could do. That was the only power he had. He's empowered to shoot people. Well, no, he's a young person who's empowered to help the world positively in tons of ways, and he just never figured that out, and we never helped him figure that out, and that's the shame.
and that's the challenge we have upon us as leaders, to embrace a new way of learning, and preparing our kids, and the notion of, you embrace the notion of future proofing kids and helping them prepare for the future.
Yes, but it's not through learning. It's through embracing a different way of growing up. That as long as we make learning our goal, and education is conflated with learning all over the world. And
Right.
as long as the only thing we say to kids is, what did you learn in school and how much did you learn? And the only thing we measure is how much learning did you do and all that. As long as we focus ourselves only on this idea of learning, we will never get to where we want to be. Learning is the wrong goal. It may have been the right goal in the past when it
Right.
was hard to learn, but now the learning is in your pocket. You have a YouTube on every single thing you could possibly want to know about, and so it is really really silly. And then what we do it worse because we rank the kids, and ranking is almost like shooting them because every time somebody wins, everybody else loses. So ranking kills. Ranking is really a wrong approach.
Mar-
And yeah, go ahead.
Mark, you talked about um, what sometimes we get crying babies in the mall here, so that's one of the downsides of having a co-working
That's
space
okay.
in the
There are
mall.
leaf blowers in my
But
backyard.
what about as you said, 20 years? How do we accelerate this? How do we engage our leaders, the change agents, to lessen that curve? I mean, 20 years is a long time. I'm seeing change happening. We have examples across the country of small school districts, agile, that the community is going to be the school. They're becoming hubs. They're not going to call them schools anymore. So we're seeing that happening, but not in a systemic way.
Yes, and I go back. The reason I picked 20 years is 20 years ago is when I coined the term digital natives, and that term was very radical and everything else at the time. Now it's published every day in newspapers, so it really does take time for people to accept new ideas and new ways of looking at things. And the tongue in cheek way to accelerate stuff is what Bill Gates said earlier in his life that I remember. I may be the only person to remember. They said, "Well, how are you going to get people to accept these new things called computers? How are you going to get the old people?" And his answer was, "People die." So it is really, in a sense, generational turnover, and that's why it takes 20 years. And there is very little that the only things that I can think of that we can do to accelerate it is to give kids more power and to show them, let them accomplish things, let them have roles that we normally give to adults, let them do a lot of things that they can do, but that most adults would never even dream of letting them do. So what if we said, okay, all the teachers in the school are gonna, just lay back and yeah, we got to pay them, but the only people who are going to work are going to be the kids, right? And so there are people doing things like that. Esther Wojcicki does things like that. She sits there in the corner and the kids run the class, but most people are not willing to do that. Most people are not willing to accept young people as powerful. And that's why it's going to take 20 years, because people will die and fall on their swords before they accept that.
Thank you for that. I'm inspired when kids are given agency and you see what they're capable of. One of the master teachers I know in Toronto, her and her colleague have been doing a business day showcase for the last 18 years, where teams of kids in grade 4 to 6 create businesses. They do business plans. They come up with a logo. They come up with a product. They do letter writing for sponsorship, and then they do a showcase of their wares and they sell their products. And it's all around sustainability and the environment. And and to see the professionalism and how they embraced the responsibility is really heartwarming when you give the kids agency.
It's heartwarming, and the sad part is that it's surprising, and that's the sad part. And
Yeah,
so, yes, people like you, there are tons of stories around this. They should go further, because the best thing that I've heard about those projects that you're talking about is that they need to have clients. So you don't just let kids do a project; you let kids do a project for a company or for a city.
right.
And the people who run the company in the city are the judges of whether it's a useful and completed project or not the
Brilliant.
teachers. Teachers don't know. So let's put the kids together with real clients. And when you can give me some more examples of that, I will listen very
Yeah.
carefully.
Yeah. Well, one of the schools that won our challenge last year from Winnipeg, Louis Riel School Division, a team of girls put together a Minecraft redesign of their school, recreated in Minecraft, and a welcome garden, learning commons, a number of unique elements that as we were planning a renovation for the school. And the superintendent said at the conclusion of it, when he saw the video and we announced them as the national winners, that he was sharing that video with the architects to make sure they infuse some of their ideas. I think that's
That's
really speaks to
absolutely. There are
what
there's
you're
there are
the
kids
essence of
in the
what you're talking
U.S.
about.
There are kids in classes of fourth graders who've designed theme parks, water parks for themselves, and they responding to an RFP from the city council. And the city council just said to the architects, You build that. You build what the kids
Amazing.
design and what the kids want. So when we start to see that, and it's so one of the things that we can do now, and I think I've heard of maybe one place that does this, we can build our schools as just big empty barns and that are very nice on the outside. And the kids using CAD software can redesign them every week or every month. And they can rebuild it and it can happen and it can change and it can. So you don't want to just do this stuff once, you
Yeah.
want to do it constantly. And
Well,
I'm really, I'm disappointed actually by some of the things that people hold up as great examples of change and new projects.
yeah. Well, we like to stay agile here and flexible with our work and learning spaces, and we're models of the future, and we embrace that, and it's that growth mindset that you really need, as you've alluded to, and empowered. And congratulations on your new book.
Well, am I radical enough for everybody at this point? Somebody
I
called somebody
well,
called me shockingly radical, but
you,
also
yeah.
usefully radical. Well,
It's you need to stir emotion in people to make change happen, right? It's not going to happen. People take the least path of resistance typically. So kudos to you for being the mover and shaker that you are in education and globally. You're a global legend in my books. So I'm grateful for having the opportunity to have this conversation with you today, Marc Prensky.
well, you're very kind, and I like the things that you're doing. And if you want to redesign your space, just every year get a team of kids and say redesign the space. And it can't be the same 2 years in a row. We're going to have a new team every year. We're going to redo it. It'll be radical. Um, this is what the world is now. It's changing continuously, and if we don't embrace that, if we think we can do things once and stop, then we're just not at the same wavelength as the young people who know that they live in a continuously changing world, and that's a scary world for people who didn't grow up in one.
Yeah, 100%.
We
With
acknowledge.
that, with that, Marc Prensky, thank you so much again for your time this afternoon.
My pleasure.
That was Marc Prensky, award-winning, globally acclaimed, practical visionary author who is focused on the world's 2 billion kids. And be sure to check out his book, Empowered. And until next time, stay healthy, stay safe, and keep the learning curve steep.